logged in, comma, how did that work? Question mark. So we are ready to start, folks. If Susie, if you would start with the roll call, please.
Recording in progress.
All right, so we can start roll call. Committee member Hopkins. He looks like he's not here today. Committee member Goodman is also not here. Co-chair Samin.
Is your mic on? It's not. So there's no speaker in here today, so you all need to just speak up.
Oh, speak up louder.
Okay.
But I hear everything, but you still need to speak into the microphone for the live stream because that's coming in my ears.
Okay.
So, but for each other, you'll just be a little louder. Just for today.
And I'm here. Thanks.
And co-chair Lee.
Kenna is on Zoom.
She's on Zoom. Let's see. Okay. So she's here.
I'm here, but I'm not present as a voting member,
Okay.
and I probably won't be here for very long.
Okay. So committee member Pierce.
Here.
Committee member Sutjink.
We
Oh.
cannot hear you.
I can't hear you. Committee member Sutjink.
Oh, Schmanting. Yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm here.
Sorry about that.
I didn't recognize it. I was thinking different.
Oh, they can't hear you.
Well, I thought.
Oh, there's no
we,
speaker. Oh. Committee member Carter
Here.
and committee member Ambrosia
Present.
and Mayor Rich
Present.
and council member Maurer.
Here.
Okay, so we have 2 absent and 1 on Zoom, and everyone else is present.
All right. Thank you, Susie. So now we're moving on to review of action items from last time. The Vision Zero information from Katati and thereabouts was going to be passed through the planning department. I believe that has already happened. We'll have an update today. We had forwarded a discussion on working further with RCPA to today's agenda. And Kenna was going to survey about potential alterations in our meeting structure, and that did indeed happen. At this time, we're open to any comments from the public regarding items not on the agenda. Steve.
Hi, Steve Pierce, and I'm going to talk about something that we have never really talked about as a group and is actually a very hot topic coming up in the city shortly. You may have heard about the increase in the water and sewer rates. We're looking at, I think it's around 50% or so, somewhere around there in both those, water and sewer. So looking at our city's website, we do have some information on water conservation measures and design that you can do for water conserving plants, but it's a bit of a mishmash. Probably most of you don't know, we actually have a rebate program for efficient toilets, $125. I didn't know it was still around. I heard about it years ago. So I contacted the building department and they were going to check and see are there still funds in it? I guess it gets re-upped each year, and don't know if it's really a going concern or not. The links that are embedded in it don't work, unfortunately, about what are the toilets that are available for the rebate. And then if you look at some other cities, in particular Petaluma, if you were to Google laundry to landscape in Petaluma, well, they have not only a rebate program, but a very good resource list and videos of how to, parts list, whatnot. And that their rebate is $125 meant to cover the materials. Now we're kind of in a paradoxical situation with the city. If we incentivize people to conserve, well, that's money we don't really have. And then we still have the infrastructure costs of sewer, really, regardless of how much they're going to use. So in some ways, the city is incentivized to have people use more because the water bills will be higher, and we can pay off these bonds and whatnot that we do to do infrastructure. Nonetheless, we still need to try to put forward more water conserving measures. And I'm looking to see if there's anybody who would like to spend a little bit of time kind of going through what our existing links are and proposing some new design to the website. I think we're all going to get, at least city government is going to get hit with a lot of people upset about their water bills. This is a little bit of a response that can go towards trying to deal with that thing. That it's a freight train coming down the tracks, right? Pointed at the city council. And if you're interested, just contact me and we'll try to improve our website. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve. Are
Steve-
there...
Just real quick, Steve, are you able to send those links that do not work over to us so we can work on getting those links fixed? I believe it's possible during the transition that there were some links that did not get fixed.
Sure,
so
I can
I'm
do that.
happy.
It's embedded in a form. But,
Okay.
I also tried to follow up. We have a whole nother program for the city of Sebastopol, Water Pays and Saves. So the idea is you're saving as you're paying on your water bill. It only covers indoor things like toilets, shower heads, aerators. And it'd be great to find out, well, how's that program doing? I know there was a flurry in the beginning when it was set up. How many people have actually used the program? Is the city paying anything towards that program? Questions, or
Okay.
I don't know any of those.
Me either, but I'll look into it.
Great, thanks.
So it's a Bayland program, right?
It is.
Yes.
All right. Thanks again, Steve. At this time, is there any further public comment from anybody on items not on today's agenda? Okay. If not, at this time, are there any statements of conflict of interest from committee members or staff about items that are on today's agenda? No, again, great. All right, we're ready for the planning department report, if you please.
Sure. This will kind of be two-part. I'll update the committee on some of the items that they sent off to staff to have approved by council. So the Vision Zero resolution was adopted and approved by City Council at their May 7th meeting. The building electrification letter of support to the state was also approved at that meeting. And we are, and this is just a general information for the group. Tonight, after this meeting, the Planning Commission will be hearing their milestone number 2 update from the active transportation plan, which is the update to the bicycle and pedestrian plan on the countywide level. And as part of that, we will also be hosting city staff and some of the members of the SCTA group will be hosting a public workshop May 22nd at the Fireside Room at the Art Center from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. That is a news article on the city's website. Unfortunately, we were not able to get it into the newsletter, but it is available on the website, and just making the group aware of that, to get any additional public comment on the kind of second part of this plan, which includes updates to the network, both in regards to safety and connectivity, and then also policies and procedures that they're recommending we move forward with. That is the end of that part. I will turn it over to, first I want to introduce to those who haven't met him yet, David Woltering, who is the interim planning director for us. He's filling in while we recruit for a community development director. And he is going to provide a report on the planning department's recommendation on all of cities and committees reorganization as we were tasked by city council.
Sure. Yeah, I had a question about the first part. So in the community, I did hear that people had sent in comments on the active transportation plan.
Yes.
And so when they looked at tonight's agenda of the Planning Commission, they didn't see that mentioned. And
Yes.
I just wonder, how can people make sure that their comments kind of are carried along in this process?
Sure.
Because the comments were submitted a year ago.
Yes. So the note on the staff report that says public comment, or there is no public comment as part of this staff report, is in relation to the memo of the staff report itself. The overall project, the active transportation plan, where people sent in those comments, is included in the overall item that is being presented to the Planning Commission tonight. So the note in that staff report is just comments about that staff report. It's not comments about the project in general.
Yeah, until that staff report was available like 5 days ago.
Correct.
We don't expect public comments really.
Correct. Yes.
But
It's
my
just for
point-
that single
my question
document.
was also the people that spend a lot of effort making these comments,
Mhm.
how can they have the satisfaction of recognition?
As part of the
And so is it like on the website already, these comments, or?
Yeah, so the link for the interactive map is active again, so people can provide comments in there. And part of the second milestone update is taking all those comments that were received and transmitting them into the map that they are proposing tonight, as we heard the community's input that this section of road is lacking in safety and connectivity. Here is a proposed project or plan to meet those needs that the city or the community has expressed. So you'll see in the presentation tonight, there is a existing facilities map, and then there's the proposed facilities, which kind of connects those two through the public engagement that we received so far.
Thank you, John.
Okay, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm David Woltering. I'm a city planner. I've been doing city planning work for more than 35 years in Northern California. And I was the first planning director for the town of Windsor after incorporation. That was an interesting time for that community, for sure. I've also been the planning director, community development director for the city of Cotati. And in 2018, I retired as the community development director for the city of San Bruno on the San Francisco Peninsula. And since then, I've been asked to step in as an interim planning or building director, community development director for a number of different communities: Clayton, Healdsburg in this county, Fairfax, Ross a couple of times, and now I'm here. So I'm pleased to be here, and I kind of step in as an interim director during recruitments. And in this case, your community is recruiting for a permanent community development director. So I'll be here during this interim period to assist the staff and all of you, and I'm pleased to be here. This report I have this evening, this afternoon, is really a follow-up. The staff had met with your committee And I believe Larry McLaughlin, the city attorney, also met with you and talked to you about the Brown Act and Brown Act compliance and was giving you guidance in that area. And you're well aware that the city council is working on its budget for the next fiscal year and kind of looking at, oh, there's a gap. How do we, address that gap and whatnot, and looking carefully at opportunities to streamline, improve processes, and save costs and generate revenue. So one of the cost savings measures that the city council and city manager at this point is really focusing on is kind of looking at boards, committees, and commissions. Can we improve processes and reduce costs? And your group provided some feedback recently to our staff. We sat down, it was shared with me, and we sat down with the city manager and the assistant city manager and reviewed that information. And today, this evening, I'm kind of looking at what came out of our discussion with the city manager to give you an idea of what we believe may be going forward, but also looking for your feedback on this. Again, this is kind of a summary of what may be going forward. So as I mentioned, the city attorney, Larry, had spoken to you about Brown Act, and that's important as a group to be informed and comply with the Brown Act. And then in terms of just cost savings, again, staff time, technology, the idea kind of moving forward is that your meetings would be Zoom and in person, but without live streaming. But the Zoom option would allow for recording, which is important to make sure that your meetings are recorded and that there's that public information that's available. In terms of the meetings, the idea would be to meet on a quarterly basis, so reduce the number of meetings, but have staff support. And of course, the Zoom option so that people in the community can observe your meetings, and that those meetings would be recorded. And then, as I think it's been done to some extent already, John, of course, would know better, but the idea would be, for the committee to work with staff and help staff in terms of developing agendas and reports and whatnot to, again, kind of look at cost savings in terms of reducing, staff time and costs. So this is a quick summary of what we're looking at this time, that is the city manager, assistant city manager, and staff, and what we anticipate bringing forward to the city council through the budget process. But today we want to make sure, as we check in with you, if you have thoughts and comments on this summary, please share those with us, and we'll report your information back to our city manager. So that concludes my report. I'm pleased to be here and look forward to responding to any of your questions.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
As facilitator, I want to point out that our next two items on the agenda also relate directly to this subject.
Okay.
And so there will be, more feedback and discussion and review. We had a survey that went out to all members, including members who were absent last time, about their preferred potential alterations in the meeting structure. So I want to welcome clarifying questions or initial comments from committee at this time, but recognize that we're not in a position to respond fully until we've also gone through the points that are following immediately after. For myself, I would like to clarify on the subject of Zoom, because I think last time we were discussing this in meeting, there was a sense that Zoom might not be required for sake of Brown Act compliance, as long as the meeting was in a public forum, public attendance and comment was allowed, and that agendas and some form of action minutes were posted. You, if I understood you right, suggested that Zoom was helpful in the recording aspect of it, but I'm wondering if it is the opinion that it is required for that aspect, or if again, the public place, the agenda, and the minutes of some form being posted, if that could be sufficient.
Sure. Be happy to respond. It's not required. However, we are recommending it. And we're recommending it because in terms of a public record of your meeting, Zoom allows us to have a public record and would save staff time in terms of compiling minutes, et cetera. And it does, if I could continue, and it does allow the opportunity for the public to view your meetings. So there's the opportunity for viewing, recording the minutes, and saving saving some staff time in terms of compiling minutes. The live feed would not be proposed, at least at this time. We're not proposing that. And that's a cost savings measure. So I hope that responds to your question.
I think that does. Just to clarify, staff has never been composing minutes for our meetings.
Okay.
And frankly, the minutes reporting has been a weak point in our reporting. We have at times had what we call action minutes, which is to say not everything that was said, but what was voted on or what was accomplished there. Also, it's our understanding that Zoom actually requires staff time because unfortunately Zoom bombing has become an endemic regional issue. And so that our understanding has been that an extra staff member is required just to handle the Zoom aspect of it. And so we had seen the expense of Zoom. We're talking about the feasibility of eliminating that entirely. So I just want to understand what the pluses and minuses are.
Sure, I'll respond to the Zoom aspect of it. So the Zoom component that has a cost to it is the live streaming portion of it, because we have a staff member monitoring the room to make sure that nobody is coming in and disrupting the meeting. If it was just a recording, there's not, a staff person that's required to monitor the meeting because there's no public engagement as part of that Zoom function. If you wanted to make a public comment, you would have to either come in person or mail in your comment beforehand. So the Zoom live stream portion of it, what we're recommending is that monitor and projector not be an option anymore. Obviously, this all has to be approved by City Council, but that portion of the live streaming part, which is monitoring the chat room and the public participation, that is the fee aspect. We pay a yearly Zoom subscription regardless. So Zoom is always going to have some sort of cost to it. The additional cost is Zuzi monitoring the room to make sure that we're not having Zoom bombs. Okay. But if we only make it to, for example, our webinar mode where people from the public can watch the meeting, they can't interact with anybody in the room. Okay. So that's the difference between the two.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Dana, please.
Yeah, thanks for bringing up that question. So right now we're looking at this screen here. Under this format, would what appeared on the screen and what was available for others to view during a meeting, would it just be simply a view of this room? Wouldn't see anyone else who is signed on, wouldn't see their little squares, no comments, no visual,
That's
nothing like that. It's just
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And no, would they be able to view it? Would others be able to view in real time during the meeting, or just
no?
later?
It would be the recording that gets uploaded when the meeting concludes. So in most cases, usually we can get that up either the same day or next day, so there's not a huge lag time. But it would not be a live viewing of the meeting going on. It would
Got it.
be at the.
Thank you. That answers all my questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, please.
Do you have any cost pricing of this proposal? How much is it going to save us? Because the letter that we wrote, the draft had some numbers in them, and so it would be helpful to kind of compare the two proposals, not just on the content, but also on the cost.
Sure. So from the numbers that I had sent out, the tech component of it is about $1,400 a year. So it's not, the cost savings of that part is not a huge amount. So that's kind of the answer to your question there. It's just the other component of it is the staff time that is needed to conduct that kind of security measure for the meetings. So if we were to remove that part of it, then you remove that staff time needed.
I like the sound of this very much. I do have a question about the quarterly. I'm wondering if it might be possible for us to have 2 additional meetings per year, perhaps without staff, but just with a meeting of our committee, or if it's required to have staff there too. I understand that it's expensive to have staff, so
I can
wondering.
respond to that. We had a prior meeting, the Public Arts Committee meeting, and that question came up there as well. And the city attorney, Larry McLaughlin, was here and responded to that. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible, but there are, Brown Act requirements as far as posting, noticing, minutes, et cetera, et cetera. And as we went back and forth for some time about that, there was some concern about that committee being able to comply with all aspects of the Brown Act. And so that was a concern. Is it possible? Yes. However, Brown Act compliance would be required, and there would be, the posting, the minutes, et cetera, et cetera.
Just a quick clarifying question on that, if I may, Phil. Are there specific Brown Act requirements about the nature of the minutes?
Not necessarily the nature of the minutes, but having minutes so that there's a public record.
Sure.
As you know, I think there are a variety of formats for minutes.
Mhm.
They can be action minutes for that matter.
Okay, so some form of minutes, but not clearly defined,
Yes,
could be
correct.
acceptable.
That is
Okay.
correct.
Phil.
Yeah, so I saw the number of $159 or so an hour for one of you to attend a meeting. And I was kind of curious about the incremental cost per meeting and what that total might be. For instance, if I think that we need 10 meetings to satisfy what we can do for the city and save the city money or attack ways to get money for the city, maybe we can weigh that against a per meeting budget. Like what would you call that in business?
Well, part of the discussion, if I could, kind of working off of that, part of the discussion with our prior committee that we met with today was workload and mission and mandate, and what you think you need in order to perform your mission, your assigned mission. And so we're looking for feedback today. This is an initial recommendation, and we want to make sure that in terms of what we're putting out there, that your mission, of course, it's assigned by the city council, but in terms of you fulfilling your mission, that you have the support you need, with the understanding that in the context of moving forward this fiscal year and beyond, that there are fiscal constraints. The city is looking carefully at opportunities to reduce costs, and the reorganization of committees, commissions, and boards is one of those areas. So in that context, as there can be cost savings in terms of accomplishing your mission and reporting back to our city manager as he and his team, our team, put together a recommendation to city council, we're putting on the table kind of a summary of what we believe could work based on feedback from your committee, but we're looking for feedback today as well.
Sure. Okay. I do want to say again that we do have a couple other points on this same subject. So if we have further clarifying questions,
Yeah.
great, but I don't.
So is it possible to make just an audio recording of the meeting that is not based on Zoom?
We, as John mentioned, we have a subscription to Zoom anyway, which we're paying anyway. That is, the city is paying anyway. So Zoom has that capability, which the city is paying for anyway, as John described it. So it seems like it's a tool the city is paying for anyway. Why not use it?
But I thought that for the image to exist, you need a camera and a technician.
I think that in terms of the more simplified Zoom approach that John described, that yes, there would be a need for a camera, that the Zoom recording would be uploaded after the meeting. But in terms of the number of cameras in terms of the staff support, it would be much reduced and there would be cost savings.
Okay. Any further clarifying questions or comments on the proposal as such so far? Okay. Any other questions on any other aspects of the planning department report at this time? Okay. Thanks, everyone. If we could take a moment to get to the city council report, and we will come back to this subject shortly.
Well, already John had mentioned that the Vision Zero passed and the electrification letter also passed. This one was, the Vision Zero passed on consent and the electrification letter passed 3-2. It was pulled for discussion, but they both passed. And the other thing that passed that I thought was relevant was the approval of the transportation grant of the consultant, Fair and Peers. So they've approved the consultant, and this is for the Main Street area downtown redesign.
And sorry, I would assume that they will have some public process yet to be determined
I
and
would
announced.
think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's just the beginning stages.
Okay, great. All right.
Yeah,
Thanks. Any other news or questions?
Yeah, so the electrification was pulled from consent, right?
Yes.
And the person who pulled it from consent is our representative at the Sonoma County Transportation Authority, who voted against
That's
it.
correct. That's correct.
So my question is, what does it mean to represent the city at a public body? Do you need to represent like the majority opinion of the city council, or are you presenting your own point of view?
Are you talking about Councilmember Hinton who pulled it?
Well,
who's on
anybody.
RCPA?
She voted against it. She said, when I talked about this issue at the Transportation Authority, lots of people were against it. I did not look into that, but I believe her. So I assume she voted against it. And so she represented the city voting it against, while the city council voted in favor of it. So my question is, how do we deal with a situation where an individual council member has a point of view, expresses his point of view in representing the city that does not represent the city's point of view?
I'm happy to chime in on that.
Go ahead.
So I have a comment on that. What my first comment is that as individual city council members on city issues, we vote as we feel is appropriate for the city. And I do believe that that's what Nisa Hinton, Councilmember Hinton, did in this particular instance. And it was based on her understanding of how our CPA had handled this issue, which was, as Stephen Pierce has shared in an email, a limited understanding. That she understood that our CPA had not supported the letter, and she also understood that we would be the first jurisdiction that would be moving forward with this. So for various reasons, she felt, as she expressed it, that supporting this letter would not be in the best interest of the city. That's how we vote as city council members. However, when we then move forward and vote on behalf of or express our opinions on behalf, I'm speaking on my own behalf, but I think it does represent others. When we then go and represent the city's opinion, as Nisa Hinton may be expected to do on this issue, then Nisa Hinton will represent the city's view as the way in which the majority voted. And that's how I handle my obligations. I vote as I feel it's appropriate for the city, and then as a city council member representing the full city council, we are obligated to represent the interest and perspective of the full city council. So that's how I walk that particular situation. Council member Sandy Maurer may have a different perspective, but I bet that's about the right ethical boundaries.
I'm wondering if, Steve, you might want to have any comments about that since you were at the meeting.
Sure.
Whether or not she can represent her own views or the city's views, yeah, I don't really have anything to say about that. But in terms of RCPA not having supported this, well, I actually reached out to RCPA and got a response back yesterday. And they felt like they didn't have the time when the issue was coming forward that I brought to them back in January to move on this thing. It's time sensitive for the code cycle for the 2025 code. Well, they ended up seeing that those cities that had sent out, the 26 cities that sent out a letter trying to push the governor to do this, they sent out a subsequent letter asking for the same thing. So at this point, she's reevaluating, and they are going to try to fit it into their work cycle and push it at the RCPA level. So that was encouraging to see. And I since followed up with the city council and let them know that. There was some other odd things at the council. There seems to be a general concern about being first on things. Like, we don't want to be first, which is kind of weird because the city used to pride itself on being first and really push that. And, quite honestly, it's first, second, last. Really, it are the right things to do within the constraints that the city faces. And there was too much emphasis on being first, but now I feel like we're potentially facing a timid council, especially after the next election. Thanks.
Thank you, Steve.
Are we still on city council reports? I lost track.
Yes, we are at the moment.
Okay.
If nobody has further.
So I just wanted to report out that I was the welcome speaker at the Zero Waste Symposium, North Bay Zero Waste Symposium. Ambrosia was there too. And the main piece that I wanted to share with everyone was that I had multiple people come up to me and say, there was Fairfax, and then there was another jurisdiction, electeds from other jurisdictions, who came up to me and said that they actually used our website resources to share with others when there was a question regarding, for instance, what could be done to encourage zero waste at events. So I thought it would share that. It's very validating for me, and I think it speaks to all of the hard work of this group to know that the outside world is actually relying on Sebastopol's, the result of Sebastopol's efforts, and thank you to Recology and Ambrosia for part of that, when they try to address zero waste issues. So multiple people came up and said that to me.
Great. Thank you, Diana. Any other questions or comments on city council report subjects at this time from anyone?
Just to let everyone know that this is an election year, and there will be 2 spots open. I believe Councilmember Hinton will be running again, but I think the papers come out in July or August.
So consider running, everyone. Just saying.
Those who really like their public meetings. Okay. All right. Any other details on that subject? I see that. What's your sense of all that activity there? Okay.
Yeah, please do. Even though there's nothing that's disruptive enough going back and forth.
Yeah, I mean. All right, thanks everyone. Moving on, our first item on the regular agenda would be working group reports for activities not on the agenda. It's amazing how that works, sort of a Zen koan, if you will, in a certain fashion. I will report briefly back from the sequestration working group. We had another essentially highly successful compost giveaway event this last weekend. Aside from the fact that managing the early birds is getting to be a whole thing, all the folks who try to jump the gun is definitely requiring some management. Other than that, it was pretty smooth and pretty quick. And within 3 hours, we got rid of, I would say, at least 70 cubic yards of compost. And there were still folks at it at 12:30 when I slipped out of there. So we're now in a place of getting rid of the entire pile in less than a day, which I think is exemplary. And it's been very popular. We'll do another couple in the fall. I'll keep you posted when I set dates. That's it for that. Any other working group items? Zeno, I don't know if you wanted to comment further on the Vision Zero item that passed through the council, or if you feel that that's squared away.
Yeah, so we're grateful that this finally made it. It took a while. It was on the consent calendar, which means that it wasn't really discussed in the city council, which for me means that we have to keep these issues alive, because there's so many regulations and ideas floating around in jurisdictions, and the ones that we feel are important, we need to constantly kind of remind people about. Yeah, so that's the only thing I thank you again for pushing this forward. So the other thing about the transportation working group, we started thinking about e-bike support campaign as the most promising thing right now for a big impact of this committee in transportation in Sebastopol. So this will come back in the future.
Great, thank you.
So I don't really have a working group update, but I have a success for Sebastopol. Really good one. So I've been involved with Apple Blossom Festival now for, I think I'm going on 7-8 years. I can't keep track. And I, starting in 2019, until this last Apple Blossom Festival, I was able to divert 41 cubic yards of waste out of the landfill. So we only put 8 yards of garbage in the landfill. Everything else was recycled or composted. So that was really, really cool. I've been working so hard. So Apple Blossom is finally going green. Yeah, and for Recology, there's new newsletters out right now, and we're offering tours of our new material facility. So if anybody's interested, you can go online and take the tour. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Any other off-the-cuff working group reports at this time from anyone? Oh, okay, thanks everyone. Sorry.
I was hoping Phil was going to say it, because it was last month that we had the contractor event.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and talk about it?
No, go ahead.
Okay, well, this is something that Phil should really be tooting his horn, because he organized this whole thing. It was held at the Livery, and the idea was to have local contractors that were interested in electrification come out and hear from Sonoma Clean Power, Amy's Roofing and Solar, the Climate Action and Resilience Division, that's a county group, and then fielding questions. And I think we had about 15 or so attendees or so. And with that size, there was actually opportunity for some back and forth. And I was pushing various things to Sonoma Clean Power. For instance, other jurisdictions that do community choice aggregation like Sonoma Clean Power is, they actually have incentives directly to contractors to get them to get into the whole electrification game. So I think there's some avenues there that as a committee or as a working group, we can look to work with other groups to push things that we don't have the resources to do as a city, but there are ways that we can move forward on electrification within those constraints. Who are the deep pockets or deeper pockets here? Sonoma Clean Power and the Climate Action and Resiliency Division, and to a lesser extent, Bayron. So as the city doesn't have money to do things, we need to find out ways that we can team up and collaborate with other groups and cities to influence those that do have money. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
It was really a great event, and Phil did a fantastic job.
The real benefit, and I don't know if I'm yelling in your ear or not. The real benefit was that we made a connection with 2 or 3 different levels of policymakers, and I'm getting the alphabet soup kind of jumbled in my head, but one of them is reaching out from Sonoma County and looking for an action plan next year, and considering quite a few different actions. And because of our level of involvement and enthusiasm, we were able to contribute significantly. And they are thinking more about us as far as like distributing e-bikes for a benefit around here, like discounted e-bikes and other kinds of paths. But also, we've got their ear, and they heard from local contractors on how that they can improve their own services. Being new services on their own, they have incentives for HVAC and or heat pumps, and we discovered kind of the friction involved in getting these incentives distributed, and the waviness and the fluidity of these fundings are causing everybody grief. So they are actually trying to work more collaboratively amongst themselves, through our feedback, to get a more singular, proposal out to the community at large, which is more than Sonoma County. And I feel like that's the win is getting these larger organizations to act more responsibly towards the contractors who are the end, fundamentally the end consumer. And in that way, individuals in our area who are concerned about electrification can feel more confident in getting a trustworthy and a single point of truth quote, and feel good about that. And I also learned about a few more vendors and things like that I think have real potential to undercut the price of traditional services.
Great. Thanks a lot for those reports. Alex.
Oh, great. Can you hear me? So curious, because what I'm hearing basically, and kind of what I'm gathering from the work you guys are doing, it's really about farming contractors or getting the contractors' attention, like almost like I don't want to say by sourcing, but like recruiting is the best word. Recruiting contractors that we want to get on kind of the climate energy efficient team, which I haven't seen programs from Sonoma Clean Power, Bay Run reach out to, because they have their certified contractor thing, but that's kind of a little bit more proactivity on the contractor side. Is there, maybe that's the recommendation, is making some sort of recruiting or something like that for those bigger organizations. Is that
This really was a point of discovery, and we kind of, especially with Steve's experience working with Cool Petaluma and some other groups, found out the problem was probably with the contractors. And when people get their first couple of quotes, it's what they rely on to go forward with any kind of project. So the contractors have to be well educated, because they're not going to, an individual consumer can't have the burden of digging so incredibly deep to try to find the answer. And because, we are automatically trying to find that answer, we did a lot of work for them, and kind of, are setting people up for a better interaction.
Great. Thanks again, you guys. All right. If there's no further comments on that subject.
I have a point. So there was somebody online who wanted to comment. And I think the way we run this is we allow public comments on item not in the agenda at the beginning, and on each item in the agenda we allow a public comment. So I felt that we were remiss a bit here in disregarding the public comment.
My question on that was more strategic, because there was a vast flurry of Zoom windows that all opened up quickly and started cycling, and they all had their hands on. and none of them were showing camera, and it all came at once.
I know,
So it
but
was frankly a
there may be
suspicious presence.
a decent
That's
person there.
why I asked Susie about it, and John, and they said they would check in.
Anyhow,
and we'd
I
circle
just want to
back around.
register my.
So I,
recommendation.
as facilitator, was watching that and was making a judgment call. If that was a legitimate public comment, I expect that they would wait a little bit longer and they would have a chance to interact productively during a public comment period. So it's not something that was
Weighing
ignored.
in
It
support
was a
of our.
No, I
strategic
just wanted
approach.
to, I disagreed with that decision. I think it's very important if we have Zoom and we have people that raise their hand, at least to talk to them to see whether they're
We had
viable.
not reached a public comment period, frankly. So
Every time after every
there's
item there's a
the
public
city-
Facilitator, if
the-
I
for
could,
instance, that happened during the city council report section, where it's just a city council report, where it's just a news update. It's not an item for comment and discussion. So again, any legitimate member of the public can stick around and bear with the process like the rest of us are.
So
Thank you.
committee, it seems like the facilitator was monitoring, observing, and was handling the matter. So committee member, your comment is well taken. You know, we need to make sure that we involve the public, but monitoring was occurring. Thank you.
Very much. All right. Our next item on the agenda is the survey results on the potential meeting format changes. Kenna put that out online. Unfortunately, I've been communicating with Kenna, and she is elsewhere and has a really poor connection and is not in a position to share screen and discuss that, although she did organize that survey. I hope, actually, I am confident that everybody responded to that because I have the results in front of me on this screen. And we got responses from 8 voting members, which I believe the only 2 abstentions on that front were our city council members who sent a note in saying that they felt that they would refrain from commenting on that subject since it was sort of up to us. So we did get all current voting members and a few extra working group members and members of the concerned members of the public. So we have a pretty thorough assortment of responses here. Let me just see a quick show of hands. Were people able to look through these results prior to this meeting, or in general, have people not seen them?
I did not get it.
If you're able to bring it up and share the screen, that would be great. Thank you. Because I'm not actually logged on to Zoom. All right. Well, I will start. Oh, there we go. So yeah, that's that first screen there. So that's the cross section of people who responded. The long green line there is all 8 current voting members.
I'm
and
sorry,
we-
Joshua, I'm sorry to interrupt, but is there a way to zoom in so that we can see the relevant portions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Can it go a little bigger?
That should do. Okay. So that's just who voted. We have 8 committee members, 3 additional working group members, and 1 additional member of the public for a total of 12. Moving down to the next question. There was some question as to whether we were going to continue working as an official city group. Again, we've discussed that in a few meetings since the fall. Again, the overwhelming response is that upwards of 80% of respondents believe we should continue to be an official city committee. Moving down to the next one there, the third question. So the following question, since everybody answered the survey, I won't belabor the subject too much. There's a series of options of what we should do in response to the budgetary crisis. Keep meetings directly as they are and try to keep going as we have been going with Zoom and double staff and all that sort of thing. Most people are saying not the greatest. We had 2 folks who thought that was a good idea, and everybody else was in the meh category or the maybe not category. So, all right, next one, number 4. Okay, this is about discontinuing the use of Zoom. In this case, we have upwards of, about 75% of respondents there thought that this was a good idea or a brilliant idea. So overall, there's a lot of support for not using Zoom, presuming, of course, that proves to be permissible. But again, there's strong support for that within the committee. Moving to next question, there is the idea of quarterly meetings.
Joshua, I'm sorry, can I ask a question?
Certainly.
The discussion in the proposal was talking about Zoom, but that was using Zoom to record and then after the fact make the recording available. This Zoom question was focused on continuing to allow public comment during meetings?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah,
thank you. Thank you.
The Zoom only as a recording device was not an option we had heard of prior
Thank
to
you.
today. So yeah. All right. So the next subject was just should we change meetings to quarterly? 2/3 of respondents, to summarize, thought that was a bad idea. One person thought that was a great idea, and 3 people thought that was a good idea. So there we are. And the next few, there's a few more comments about frequency of meeting. Moving on to Q6, we had suggested before that perhaps staff didn't need to stay for the full 2 hours of the meeting. We do appreciate particularly the staff updates and reports and the chance to interact with that. We do value staff presence. So we had proposed previously that perhaps staff came for the first hour, but not the second hour. Again, just to reduce staff time and overhead time there. So we have, 10 out of 12 people thought that was a good or brilliant idea. Moving on to the next one, Q7. This option was about having staff come to every other meeting rather than every meeting. It was fairly well split on this one. So there's not a clear consensus there. Some people thought that was a good idea. Some people thought it was a not so good idea. Again, I would say there's not necessarily a clear answer there. You could split it however you might like. Then moving down to question 8, having staff presence here quarterly. So since that is a separate question from having meetings quarterly, which everybody thought was a bad idea or almost, having staff quarterly, we're slightly higher on the low end, not a lot higher. Let's see, what do we have? 7 out of 12 on the negative end of the spectrum, 4 out of 12 on the higher end of the spectrum, and 1 meh. Okay, and moving on to Q9, this option was no staff present. And again, almost everybody thought that was a bad idea. 10 out of 12 people in the awful or not. And that was the entirety of the questions that have happened so far. There were some comments on the bottom. I'll go ahead and read those right quickly since give everybody a chance to hear them in the fine print there. One comment, seems like the biggest expense is Zoom, not staff time, so that should go first before any other changes to meeting. Reduce meetings to every other month is a second comment. Third comment, it would be helpful to be able to see some kind of accounting what the expenses are in order to make a suggestion. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm not sure who that would have come from. It's anonymous, but we have seen those figures in prior meetings. Just to say, I believe the overall expense is on the order of 16,000 currently, and most proposals reduce it to, 3, 4, somewhere in there. Another comment, reviving finance working group to bring in more funding. Don't fall in austerity trap. Further comment, I think we established the budget we can accept and figure out how to make that work. For instance, if the city can muster 3,000, we get staff for that and drop Zoom. I'm deeply disappointed the city has questions over the efficacy of the group, given the reality of climate change and how hard the other governments are working, but it's entirely reasonable. And finally, modify the municipal code so the committee has a real function and responsibilities as regards to review of projects, purchases, proposals, as does the design review and planning commission. Have staff present as they do in other forums. Meet when reviews have been deemed necessary by staff members of various departments based on the role and responsibilities outlined in the municipal code that the CAC has. So that, again, is sort of an aside comment, but something that has been mentioned before. That we have, over the course of our years of history, sometimes had times when it felt like we weren't plugged in enough into the official city process. And so this was a call to sort of shift the nature of the meeting, of the committee rather, make it function a little bit more like the planning commission. So that is the extent of the survey. I want to point out that our next item on the agenda is a draft letter that Phil and Alex and perhaps some other folks have composed that has sort of a counter proposal for how we might undertake our meetings and our structure, et cetera. So we will come to that in a moment as well. Again, all on this sort of same topic that David opened up at the beginning. But at this time, are there any comments or questions or clarifications on the nature of the survey and what was taken there? Or does anybody want to look at additional other questions again? Yes.
In the survey, I wanted to thank Kenna for doing that. I think it was really great to have that survey to get that perspective from everyone. One question that we hadn't considered the last time we met was the idea of meeting every other month. And so people were not surveyed for that. So I just wanted to suggest maybe to discuss or to think about that, because it's kind of more of a middle ground between the 12 times a year and the 4 times that the staff is suggesting. So
It's true. Bi-monthly was not mentioned as a specific option. Yes. Were there? Alex.
Check. So another thing, because there's kind of an in between, right? It's like 2 hour. We're talking about 2 hours of staff time, right? So if we had the staff come 1 hour in the beginning, that would also be the same as having 6 meetings. So
that option.
Yeah. So that's what that was kind of like, I think, at least my personal opinion is I'd rather see 12 meetings with 1 hour of staff time than 6 meetings with 2 hours of staff time.
Sure. Diana?
Yeah, my question, in terms of the proposal from the planning department, the proposal has been staffed quarterly meetings. Does that prohibit this group from convening more frequently than that without staff present? Would the staff be open to doing the additional staff support pieces, which would be posting of the agenda and I guess that would be it. What additional pieces would be required of this group if they in fact met without staff more frequently than quarterly? Would there have to be a recording via Zoom? Would there have to be any other requirements?
If I could speak to that
Sure.
right quickly in my understanding of those questions, and I'll certainly open it up to staff as well. We need to report minutes and have agendas posted, so that at a bare minimum, and that the idea is that Zoom to some extent eliminates the need, or recording eliminates the need for minutes. However, I would suggest that there is such great value in the planning department report for us, and that in many cases that is our only way to keep track of what may be coming up at the city with respect to issues that we should be concerned about, since our role within the city process is not specifically codified. That I would suggest that if staff was only coming quarterly, that we would still want something resembling a staff report, even if there was not a presence here of just, hey, things you should watch out for in the upcoming calendar.
I understand. Thank you.
If I could, sure. What I'm hearing so far, and maybe I'll present middle ground. My sense is that there's a concern about reducing to quarterly meetings, that may not be frequent enough for the committee. And yet we are trying to look at cost savings, and that's an immediate focus for the city. I'm hearing that maybe every other month could be a possibility in terms of a committee position, in terms of frequency. I would suggest, though, that it would be important to have staff in support of your meetings. The idea of maybe a staff person or people from the department being here for an hour versus 2 would be a cost savings. You didn't realize, I don't think, and you didn't have the information, that the Zoom really would be a recording and would be posted after the meeting. So I think that might change your opinion about Zoom. So it seems like, if I could, kind of where this could be going in terms of middle ground is that, yes, it's, a city committee, the idea of cost savings, Zoom only for recording purposes, no live stream, that instead of quarterly, perhaps every other month, with staff support at those meetings, but instead of 2 hours or what have you, an hour, and so that there would be the opportunity to have staff support as you would work with staff in terms of compiling, preparing agendas and reports and whatnot. You would have some staff support. Also, I think it's important in terms of the city attorney's presentation to you, compliance with the Brown Act. I know that in the prior meeting we had today, that was something that came up for Larry and for me, and I think our staff in general. While committees certainly can, operate on their own, but they have to follow the Brown Act. And as a committee working independently without that staff support, that can be very complicated, and I wouldn't recommend it, frankly. And so I think the idea of maybe this middle ground, meetings every other month, Zoom only as we've presented it, the idea that, reduce staff time at your meetings would be kind of heading in the right direction in terms of meeting your needs as a committee in terms of support and your mission, and at the same time presenting back to the city manager for consideration some cost savings. So that's kind of what I'm hearing. And
well, we do have another proposal coming from the committee as the next item on the agenda. And is there any issue structurally in terms of compliance with a difference between having staff here for 1 hour versus having staff here for 2 hours? If they're, for instance, setting up a camera, getting the Zoom recording done, doing the reports, interacting, because, oftentimes we have something that we're discussing for a while that we're not going to take to staff yet, and they just have to sit here through it. Is there a need for the staff to be here for the whole meeting, or is staff being here for part of the meeting acceptable?
I think that's acceptable,
okay,
particularly given the fact it would be recorded. But John is here and has been here, so I really think John should respond to that.
Sure. Yeah, I would say, if my presence here was changed from the full 2 hours to 1 hour, we can still present items to the full committee as far as updates, additional things that are happening that are relatable to this group. And also, if it is from 2 hours down to 1 hour, obviously there's an hour of savings there. If it cuts down even more than that in the future, if we find that 1 hour is still more than enough, then, we can cut it down and coordinate it accordingly. But I think, like David said, having a staff presence at a meeting to ensure that everything is going the way that it should be going is very important to all boards and commissions. So I think, as the staff liaison, I'm fine with, cutting my time down to an hour. I would just prefer that the setup and then report out to the group be at the beginning of the meeting, as opposed to the end of the meeting. That way, the committee can conduct the rest of their business. And if there are any items that, may need staff consideration or you have questions for, I can answer those kind of within that first hour, as opposed to,
absolutely. I don't think anybody here has been calling for an absence of staff. So what we're really haggling about at this point is the frequency of the meetings, and quarterly is not well received by us. Frankly, we have a lot of irons in the fire, and sometimes there are things that are time sensitive and are deadlines, and we're just trying to stay in touch with the city calendar as well as the state calendar in some cases and keep things moving forward. So I think at this point we're down to, is it every month or is it every other month? And the every other month is a subject that came up actually at the end of last year when we thought about that possibility, and some folks felt that might not be frequent enough, but we went to the case of saying, well, now and then we could cancel a meeting if there weren't pressing agenda items that season. So for instance, we took a month off after the holidays. So I think that's where we're at. Again, we're kind of finishing up the survey agenda item. So I think if we could move forward to the next piece, which was the draft letter with a committee proposal, I think that'll kind of tie the bow on this subject.
I will add just one last thing. You know, if the committee does go towards a once every other month, you know, there is the opportunity to schedule a special meeting kind of in between that. That can't be a regular occurring theme, because then it's essentially a regular meeting at that point. But there is the flexibility to do that. We would just need to make sure that, you know, the space is available, staff has available time and stuff like that. So, you know, that could be another gap between the every month to every other month possibilities.
You know, since we're on the subject of scheduling and surveying and all that sort of thing, and it was pointed out that we didn't specifically address the bi-monthly option in the survey, I'd like to do an informal, non-committal show of hands survey at this point of committee members and active public members. We'll start by saying who feels like they could try to work with the every other month option, and then we'll go to who feels like the every month is important. So we'll start with the first one. Who among us active on the committee feels that they could potentially work with the bi-monthly format?
As long as there's room for special meetings.
As long as we're going for special meetings. So stick them, throw them high, keep them proud. Okay, we got like what I'm seeing for folks. Okay, who among us would really prefer to stick with monthly meetings as such? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Okay, 4-4, completely ambiguous.
Oh, well, I was actually
just checking
in the every other month. I was just declining to express my opinion.
Okay. 5-4. Okay, ambiguous. There we are. So we know. You know, it might this might be the sort of thing that comes down to the funding question. Frankly, it's sort of that staffing. I think it's important that we've agreed that staff here for half the time could be made workable, and that it sounds like the Zoom subscription only, you know, not interactive is also a pressing budgetary consideration.
Josh, I had a logistics question. If this has to do with the Zoom recording, if staff is here for just the beginning of a meeting, do we have a separate person who is here turning the Zoom recording on and off? Okay, great, thank you.
Phil?
Just to make the muddy waters muddier. I would concede having fewer meetings if a sustainability or a climate action committee member was on the planning commission.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, our connection with planning is something that has been
because basically
continually unresolved.
We did have a member who was on both committees, and any of us could also be part of the planning commission if we wanted to.
Well, there's a lot of responsibilities involved.
I know, but yes.
All right. With y'all's permission, I would like to move forward to the draft letter that Phil and Alex, and I'm not sure who else worked on. It was an attachment to the agenda. Did everyone get a chance to read that? Susie, would you be able to put that up on the screen? And I'm going to go ahead and just start reading it through relatively quickly so that we're all up to date here. It says, "Dear City Council members," at the top. That could conceivably be Planning Department as well, city staff. "The Climate Action Committee is an invaluable asset to our community, spearheading sustainability initiatives and securing funding opportunities that benefit us all. Despite budgetary constraints, the CAC's efforts have yielded significant returns, both financially and environmentally, making it a wise investment. Last year alone, the CAC secured a $200,000 grant to study ways for our city to become more eco-friendly. The committee also organizes and manages the compost giveaway event, which helps the city meet SB 1383 requirements 4 times per year at no cost to the city. Their expertise and connections have provided invaluable guidance on reducing energy costs. What sets the CAC apart is hundreds of volunteer hours its members generously donate, saving the city considerable expenses on paid consultations. These volunteers are often professionals in relevant fields, providing thought leadership and a level of expertise that would be challenging for city staff to match. Without the CAC, the burden of attending county meetings, fostering community engagement, and ensuring our interests are represented in grant opportunities would fall entirely on city staff, potentially adding tens of hours to their workload. To address budgetary concerns, the CAC proposes a cost-saving measure, reducing staff attendance at monthly meetings to a single one-hour check-in session and eliminating Zoom meetings. This adjustment could result in significant cost savings, lowering the projected cost from $15,996 per year to approximately $3,636 for the entire fiscal year, which includes 12 additional staff hours for non-meeting efforts. So to clarify on that point, there's an hour of staff time attending the meeting, and then there's the assumption that posting agendas and corresponding also takes up an additional hour of staff time per month. There's an allowance within that number. The CAC remains steadfast in its mission of promoting sustainable practices and securing funding opportunities that benefit our community. We believe that our efforts, coupled with the proposed cost-saving measures, will continue to yield substantial returns for our city while leveraging the invaluable expertise and dedication of our volunteer members. Thank you for your consideration. All right, so this is, as well as a culmination, this is potentially an action item. The idea is that we as a committee would approve that this letter be sent to relevant city staff and council, et cetera, as it stands. We could also discuss amendments or edits to this letter or any other things in light of the other related points we have discussed today.
I think if we're sending this letter out, we just need to make sure it's accurate. And to say that we secured a $200,000 grant isn't quite accurate. So, the planning department is really the one that got the grant. I mean, we were helpful with it, but yeah.
Great. Other comments from folks?
You could change that to say the CIC helped to secure.
Sure.
I just want to say this was Phil. It's all Phil. So I just helped him submit it to the agenda.
Okay. Thank you.
I think the biggest challenge for me, kind of going back to the conversation we had, was, is there an opportunity if the city the city decides we're only able to dedicate staff time every other month, is there a way we can still meet 12 times a year and have the other 6 meetings be without staff time? I don't know how that regulates the Brown Act and what the risks are. I'm not getting a very good look over here, so that just makes me a little nervous. But I'm just saying that might also be a way to have the connectivity that we need and also understand the constraints of our budget right now.
Sure.
I'll try to give a good look. Sorry. I think that John's suggestion of, the every other month and then on an as-needed basis, there could be special meetings. Again, they can't be regular, otherwise they're not special. But as need arises, that would be an opportunity for you. So, going with the every other month and then as needed, there could be a special meeting convened. And I still stand by the idea of staff support. I think, limited, reduced staff support would be important. But I think in terms of Brown Act and just setting up the meeting, making sure everything goes well, it's important. So I'll leave it at that.
I'm feeling this is way off topic, but we have a guest here today who has come from the Laguna Foundation to talk about the rights of nature. And I'm getting a little bit nervous. She's come before and wasn't able to speak, and our time is dwindling. And I know she came here to share something with us, and I'm not sure what to do about it, but I'm feeling like we need to let her say what she came to say somehow.
Okay, I'm holding time for the next agenda item. Okay.
Yeah, so my question on this item is whether the dollar figures, question for planning department, the dollar figures that we are seeing in this letter, do they appear to be relatively accurate?
Yes, as it relates to the 15,000 for the overall cost, I believe that was including tech cost and then also staff time for the majority of the meetings, both myself, my hour, and Zuzi's 2 hours for those meetings. So over that 12-month period, and then the 12-month cost for the tech portion of it. I believe that $15,000 is accurate from the Excel sheet that I have to go off of. I'm not sure the $3,000 savings that's being proposed. I would have to make sure that that number is correct based off of the reduction in time, the reduction of meetings, the reduction of Zoom. So I would need to vet that $3,000 fee savings.
And actually, it doesn't.
12,000.
What they're saying is that the projected cost for the current setup is approximately 16,000.
Correct.
And it would be reduced to 3,600 for the entire fiscal year. And so that's a substantial
correct
reduction. So the question is, I mean, we don't have to get all wound up in it, but this goes to Lisa Pierce's comment that if there's a letter that's going to be sent in, I think we need to make sure that it's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
I also just wanted to comment that, there is and I did have an additional question, Joshua, if you think it would be appropriate, which is what is the Public Arts Committee moving forward, and what is the Planning Commission moving forward, and how does that dovetail with what might be proposed here? And again, Joshua, I don't know if that's appropriate. I'll leave that with you.
Frankly, I think the Public Art Commission is such a different beast from what we do here that I don't think how they perform is translatable. Planning Commission, I'd be interested to hear, though, again, the Planning Commission is a more official body than we are in terms of their leverage within the city process. So that would be interesting to hear.
My question was as to logistics, to the extent that they're going to be looking at monthly meetings, then, go ahead.
The Public Arts they plan to meet quarterly. But I just want to make a point about the letter. And if the numbers are accurate, where there is basically a 75% reduction in cost, and we're still meeting every month, it seemed like that's a pretty good win. And I also think that staff can recommend quarterly meetings, but the Climate Action Committee can also ask for what they want, and you can bring both of those to the council, and the council can decide. So that we don't have to come to a meeting of the minds here, but we could just ask for what we want. To me, it's pretty impressive to look at meeting every month and have such a substantial savings. If it's true, I didn't calculate it. I don't know. So those are my comments.
I'm seeing a 77% reduction in fees. 3636 is allowing $303 a month in city expenses, which presumably is 2 staff hours at $150 an hour. It's roughly how that breaks out. So in light of, I'm sorry, Alex, was there another earlier question? Okay. Yeah. In light of, as we said, that we have other things to address today, that this item is not actually going to be decided in this meeting, and that we've examined multiple options, and particularly that last comment. I would like, not as a chair, but as the member, to propose in a motion that we allow this letter to go forward with specific edits as needed, as sort of our preferred scenario, and that it be compared with other preferred scenarios by other aspects of the city. And that in that sense, this letter with slight technical edits as needed to be confirmed between Phil and John essentially be passed on to relevant authorities, including the council and the planning department.
I second that.
Through the facilitator, if I could.
Absolutely.
In terms of technical edits, staff can certainly work with you or Phil on this, but I think that in terms of some of the language in here, in terms of frequency of meetings and the Zoom, there may be a need to discuss some options or edits here that go beyond the technical numbers. And I don't know, Phil, are you willing to talk about those? Or because I think we're at a point where you want to submit this letter, the city manager is working on the budget and wanting to get your perspective. And Councilmember, you're right. I mean, the staff can take a different position than this body, but we certainly want to get a sense of what is your position today so that we can kind of take that forward to the manager and that can be considered as part of the process.
My feeling is that we've covered that with the discussion and the survey. The letter proposes, essentially eliminating the live stream, the technicality of Zoom, but not interactive Zoom is neither here nor there. We're essentially proposing to eliminate the live stream, move staff to 1 hour rather than 2 hours. So, Phil.
The difference is $1,000. So, like, if you take $150 for the additional hour, if you cut the meetings in half, that's $1,000. So we're talking about chopping it down from $4,000 to $3,000, just as that quick estimate. So how important is that? Is it more important to me?
I think possibly if you wanted to add just a little bit more weight to why it's important to meet monthly. Because issues come up, you want to address them, some of the reasons why this group made the decision to not do bi-monthly and to do it monthly.
Yeah.
So if that could be added, that might be helpful.
When I do add that, it will be more about the continuity of the group and momentum. I mean, we're not voting on garages being approved every month, but what we are doing is keeping things moving forward together instead of working in smaller groups. If we did work in smaller groups, I'm sure that we can accomplish things. But to the extent that we're able to work together to meet our 2030 goals, I think we're going to severely restrict our momentum and the ability to coordinate and keep each other in check and keep each other accountable for doing more.
So let's see, Lisa.
We make a motion then to have Phil.
You have a motion and a second
There's a motion.
already.
Second, so we know we can do a vote. Is that what we're doing here?
I think if we have sort of finished questions and discussion on this subject, we would be moving to that. I would propose that, so the motion allowed for technical amendments in the letter. I would propose that adding a little sentence or two about the, once a month is important to us for continuity and regularity be counted as one of those technical edits. I would prefer that we be able to pass this along before another month of meetings. So I would ask only that the motion, that there be an understanding that the edits that we have discussed in terms of validating the numbers, changing that we secured a grant to that we helped secure a grant, and some little mention of we believe monthly meetings are important for the momentum of the multiple projects that we are managing, that we trust Phil and John to sort that out. But we're essentially sending this letter forward as a committee. Okay.
And Lisa, since you seconded the motion, are you okay with that amendment? Okay.
All right. Let's, could we do a roll call vote on this? Yes, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's an option for public comments.
So we will do in the room first, and then we'll go out to Zoom. Is there any public comments for the motion on the table? Not seeing any in the room. I'll go out to Zoom. Not seeing any, so public comment is closed. And I'll move to the roll call vote. Phil Carter?
Yes, sir.
Is it yes or no on the vote?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Alex?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Joshua?
Yes.
Zeno?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
Ambrosia?
Yes.
And Diana.
No.
Okay, so that motion does pass with 7 ayes and 1 no. And there are a couple absence of Emmett and Kenna.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay. And we have fairly little time to get into a weighty subject, which has been floating in the background for some time now. You'll remember we discussed the rights of nature issue previously some months ago. I would propose, for the sake of expediency, that we ignore the introductory letter that was, giving the background to this committee on how we have come to this place of wanting to consider the rights of nature subject. And I would suggest that we move directly to the rights of nature proposed ordinance draft, which again is a recap. The rights of nature working group talked to the planning department. They were looking at similar ordinances in other cities. The ordinance from Santa Monica was chosen as a relevant example, and so there was an editing process of taking the Santa Monica ordinance, tweaking it to something that fit more closely with Sebastopol, and all 3 versions of that were presented as an attachment to the agenda. We can start. Well, why don't we open the floor to Sonali, Magic and Company and however they would like to speak further about the ordinance and the proposal here in terms of what you would like us to notice and what sort of support or feedback you would like from the committee for today.
We're not going to have any public comment. It's already courtroom, so we're not going to.
Well, people can public comment on this subject, on the rights of nature?
After the presentation? I mean, if they're going to do a presentation on this now, our time's up.
I'm just asking for an introduction. Sonali, how, I mean, this is sort of your subject. How would you like to?
Hi, committee. Hi, staff. I haven't met you yet. Thank you, Joshua. I think you did a great summary. And we review, so as this is part of a worldwide movement, and as part of that, community members of Sebastopol, along with Magic Altman, had this included on the general plan for Sebastopol. So with that directive, we took Santa Monica's ordinance. Santa Monica was the first city in California to establish this in 2013. And we reviewed and revised it, and that's what we have before you. And we'd like your blessing to send this on to the Planning Commission for review. And it takes nature rights and it puts them beyond egocentric from anthropocentric to ecocentric. And it elevates what environmental laws do currently. And we just think it would be a very crucial part. It's a directive to the city to look to this before making decisions. And I think it would be just a very big success for this committee to move this forward. So I hope you've all had a chance to review it. And if we want to go through it and discuss it, that would be great.
Okay. Yes.
I also worked on this. We started this a year ago. We've had multiple meetings over the last year. The first ordinance we brought to you was a very different kind of ordinance. This is, and so this is an alternative to that we feel is probably a better direction. The Santa Monica ordinance is a sustainability rights ordinance. And so we have redlined some of the sustainability part just to focus on the rights of nature. And so, yeah, what we're looking for is we're looking for your eyes and your thoughts on our edits. And so we can move this forward. This would go next to the Planning Commission, and it's not on their work plan currently, but it is on their future work plan, so possibly in July, it could then come up if they were willing to take it on at that time. Yes.
Through the facilitator or council member, I'm new here, obviously, and oftentimes what I have found in other communities is that when there's a proposal like this, oftentimes that proposal is brought to council, city council, and presented, and then the city council decides if that's an item that should be referred to the planning commission for review, consideration, and a recommendation back, to the city council. I don't know your process here, but I've just, put that out there for consideration. That is typical.
Well, I had spoken with the previous planning director, and she said, find an ordinance, find a rights of nature ordinance in California, make the edits, and bring it back to the planning commission. So that's what I was advised to do, different planning director. So.
And since it's already referenced in the general plan as well, it's something that should be done. Okay. I'm going to take a chance just as a regular committee member, again, stepping outside of the facilitation and bring up a couple of concerns and questions here. One, just a straight up comment that I noticed you changed the biannual report and hearing to annual report and hearing. I think that's a really big ask, that's a lot of staff time and a lot of effort and a lot of funding. So I would question that needs to happen every year, that's a reasonable request. Secondly, I'm pretty nervous about the vagueness and bigness of this. The city or any city resident may bring an action to enforce. Now, I saw that language came from Santa Monica, but what does that mean? May bring an action to enforce. Like that's a really big open kettle there. So I would want more clarity on what that represents. And then finally, I was just a little nervous about within the rights of Sebastopol residents and natural environment, ABC, there is this in letter B, again, to effectuate those rights, residents of the city may bring actions to protect. So that the bring action thing, more clarity would help. Various natural communities, but in particular, there's this bit of atmospheric systems where obviously the atmosphere does not acknowledge city boundaries, and systems in the atmosphere are not specific to the city boundary of Sebastopol. So that's a place of potential overreach or expansion that I'm concerned about. Other than that, I mean, the ethics and intents of this process, I fully support. I'm just wondering when the teeth come in, what does that exactly look like in terms of actions and enforcement? Other questions, comments from folks? Is that a hand? It's hard to see. I'm sorry. Do you have a hand up there? Sorry.
Yeah.
I
Please
do.
go ahead. Please
May I
go ahead.
My name's Magic Altman, and I'm the person that first spearheaded getting this happening. I just want to say that we need to recognize that this is a way, we know our system is not serving the climate or the environment. We're in a crisis. And this is a way, without having, a outright revolution or anything, to just make it so property rights do not override the rights of the people and natural environment. I think it's really important to realize that this is a worldwide movement. There's there's two that have it in the Constitution, over 200 countries that have laws protecting specific, like in New Zealand, a river that the Maori brought forward. And this is very much a reflection of the indigenous people's way of approaching life on planet Earth. So in terms of the enforcement, I've been researching that. And so basically it is incumbent upon the city to, enforce it. But one of the ways we could look at this is if we enact this, then the city could inform anybody before any legal action has to happen in any way that this is violating this ordinance. It could be through a letter, or if the people come and present something at the city council, it can be invoked and they can be told that this, is against our laws. So that would be a way to, sort of de-escalate that. Other methods are that an individual can bring it to a court of law. But mainly, I think we need to look at how does City Council and the City of Sebastopol enforce ordinances and see which ones might apply specifically to this situation. So it's basically in other communities been the responsibility of the city and the community to do this. I do agree with the atmospheric river. I think that is an overextension, so it's sort of hard to say, that happening. So I appreciate, that you read the documentary very thoroughly, and appreciate your support as well. So yeah, I feel like the more people do this, I mean, if you notice, the press has not wanted to cover this at all, because it does undermine property ownership as the bottom line. And that is key to changing so that we can save the earth, basically. And every community that does this, we're adding something to it. And I'm very glad that it is mandated in our general plan to create this ordinance, and that we are doing our due diligence to try to do this at this time. So also I am working with the Nature Law Center if they can give me more information on how different cities or counties or countries regulate and enforce these kinds of laws or ordinances. And I'm ready to answer any of the questions that might be asked. And I really feel, I mean, we still have to go to the Planning Commission and the City Council. So I feel like, if you feel like it's at the level that you can approve, then we can keep this moving, and that would be awesome, since we've already spent a year on it. Thank you.
Are we at the point, Joshua, of comments, or are we just asking questions? I'm not sure where we are.
We can certainly do questions and comments.
Okay.
Well, I just wanted to respond. I wanted to respond to, I really can't address the vagueness that you brought up. I'm not sure about the legal part of that, but in terms of the annual report, there is a level of service report that the Planning Commission does every year, so it could be part of that. And the atmospheric river is something that was in the Santa Monica ordinance, or the atmospheric, so we just left it in there. I did get a call from the Sebastopol Times on this, just saying, and it will be further vetted by not only by planning, but it would be probably deeply vetted more by planning, and then on to the council. So.
Yeah, my concern is really unintended consequences here. And this goes to comments made by our chair facilitating the meeting. I just am concerned about the implications of some of these statements and what implications they might have for purposes of, permitting projects that are proposed within the city. The language appears to create some substantial mandates, and I think that actually reflects the intent of the group that's been working on this. But I'm concerned about the unintended consequences. I'm also concerned about others whose rights, we just heard a comment from Magic, I think, that this is to a certain degree about private property rights versus public needs, to the extent that we are putting forth a proposal by this Climate Action Committee. I can hear many members of our public saying, hey, where was our opportunity to weigh in? So I'm concerned about the unintended consequences. I'm concerned that I'm just honestly, in terms of being asked to vote on something, I'm just not well enough informed on it. And I feel like what we're looking at is an aspirational goal that has now been boiled down to some very specific language that has implications that concern me. So that's my general comment, but I love the concept, so I'm conflicted.
I think Zana's been waiting. Did you have something?
Yeah, I had a number of thoughts and comments on this. So I'm looking at the end, compliance assurance. And it seems to introduce the idea that there's the municipal code that has provisions that advance the goals of this ordinance, and that citizens can bring action to enforce these provisions in the municipal code, which means that only to the extent that the municipal code already recognizes rights of nature issues, can the city be brought in, or a private city can be? This is very similar. So I was involved with the Center for Biodiversity, bringing a lawsuit to, I think it was the county and the city of Santa Rosa, having to do with the tiger salamander and the development in the laguna. The tiger salamander is an endangered species. And we sued the city of Santa Rosa and the county that they allowed projects in the laguna that harm the tiger salamander. So there is a context in which you can think this through. But I don't see how this particular language advances anything that the city can already enforce. Because suppose the city decides to ban all herbicide in sale and use in town. Something like that is needed to happen in order for this ordinance to have any additional impact. The city needs to modify its municipal code in further ways than is already happening. So I don't see how that would work. We already have the Clean Air Act, the Clean Water Act, Endangered Species Act, and other environmental regulations. Is there an example of activity in the city that occasioned this proposal? Is there anything that's happened that you feel would be identified as a right of nature that these three development laws don't, or these environmental protection laws don't cover? I don't know.
I would just say
The last question I have. So when you look at these, the general plan, this is mentioned in the general plan. But it says consideration should be given to human, legal, and environmental issues. And I just wonder, do you think you already did that, or is that still something that needs to be done? So is that something you expect the planning department to analyze? And so they would make it more concrete of what the implications are.
I would expect that the planning commission would go through this and vet it fully. That's, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what about the municipal code?
So folks, I would like to point out that we are out of time, technically speaking, on this meeting. I would like to parlay for a little more time on this particular subject and say that the next agenda item behind this, unfortunately, will table till next month, but I would like to get a little farther on this one. And I've been given to understand that we have a guest here as well to speak on this subject, so I did want to make some time for your input and comment on this matter as well. And then we'll, if we could agree to perhaps another 10 or 15 more minutes, are folks willing to stick around with that just to try to make a little bit of progress on this subject, so at least we know what to do about it this month? Thanks. If you'd care to speak, we do need you to come to a microphone for the sake of the recording. Okay. Oh, and just while I have 30 seconds, there's also this bit in there where it says all species within the boundaries of the city. Oh, that's a kettle of fish, because that includes all species.
Thank you. Ann Moorkill, I'm the Executive Director of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Foundation. And I actually don't have any prepared remarks. Just got a chance to look at the ordinance in the meeting materials, but really interested in this and appreciate the overarching sentiment. But I have many of the same questions that you all have in terms of, talking about natural habitats and the environment. And we at the Laguna Foundation work in a lot of these natural habitats, but they're very much altered through time. And so who defines what is natural and what are the best management practices that are used to do restoration. And we often use the term of reconciliation ecology, recognizing that sometimes you have to alter habitats in a way to make them function better. And so does that raise any issues then with other members of the public who may not agree with the actions that an organization like the foundation might be taking in partnership with the city of Sebastopol and some of our other surrounding property owners? So I think it just has a lot of questions in my mind, but very interested in seeing how it progresses. Thank you.
All right. Further comments or questions from the committee?
Can I address some of those?
Oh, absolutely. Please.
Let me see here. So thank you. Thanks for putting a critical eye to it and stretching your minds and hearts. Joshua, I think Sandra addressed the reporting, and that's something that we had considered. The vagueness of any city resident as an action to enforce. My understanding is the city would have a code enforcer, and then citizens go to that, whether it's the planning commission or whoever, to help enforce whatever mandates are within that. So that's how, that is my understanding of how that's mitigated. And then atmospheric systems, I think for me, my understanding is what's generated within the city that we're putting out there, right? Like, of course, there's things that come in and it flows and it mixes and merges, but it's taking responsibility for our generation. And then Diana, you brought up the unintended consequences of private property to public needs and where can the public weigh in. And I think that would come in as we go down this process before it gets approved by city council, as it goes through the planning commission. We'll have the opportunity for the public to continue to weigh in. And then Zeno, I think my understanding is that's the code enforcement also. It's like this is a directive and a mandate, and looking at it through a nature's rights perspective before we make decisions, instead of going back and trying to remedy things. So it's like giving that lens to our public decision making. And Joshua, it is all species. I mean, the mosquitoes feed the fish and they feed the birds, and it is bringing our attention to an entire ecology and ecosystem. And I know that that can be challenging, and there's lots of smirks from the committee about that point, but it's like really stretching ourselves to consider the ecological impacts. And with that, it is, sometimes we do change the environment to better it, but it's still giving this lens and directive. And I think, that was all on those points. So thank you.
Alex. Ask her. Okay.
So I think how about now? So I think the challenge that I'm having trouble seeing is I'm seeing this as more of I guess I'm having trouble seeing or understanding the ask or the actual action on this piece. I think for just to Joshua, I think it just feels like there's a little bit too much ambiguity around, like, I think, having clean access to water and all the other things you noted are excellent. From my standpoint, Sebastopol is a very, relatively small municipality. It's not like we have a ton of open space or anything like that. So I could see this being maybe a little more, I don't say valuable, but a little bit more like pertinent at the county level, because you have a lot more open space and you have the oceans there. And then I would also say that maybe there's one piece of this that you really want to zone in on, maybe the biggest opportunity for improvement in the city to try to dial the ordinance into supporting rather than making it very broad this way. Maybe there's one thing, whether it's water or whatever thing that you guys decide. I understand it. Maybe that's the purpose, is making it broad, but I just think, is there one thing that we can actually, or that the ordinance can actually support in making a difference or asking for the action in?
I see this mainly as an opportunity for people who want to sue. That's really what, in terms of what it's actually doing and accomplishing, and additional work for the city to do these reports. So I don't see a lot of things that I can actually get my hands around and, oh, this is going to accomplish this, other than give people an opportunity to sue.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so Alex asked for an example. So the city has a water system that pulls water out of the aquifer. The aquifer is connected with the Atascadero Creek. The recharge is happening on English Hill, Burnside Road, and downhill there. So the city has been part of depleting the aquifer to the point that the Atascadero Creek is a dry creek in the summer now. There used to be salmon that came up from the Russian River. We don't have that anymore. So that could be a concrete point in which a historical impact of our drinking water, where we all kind of are implicated in, has affected a broader, pointable environmental concern.
Alex? I'm sorry, I thought, oh, it was Phil.
I'm wondering if this wouldn't be a more beautiful framework because it's a lens. Am I on? Okay. Maybe this is a great framework that we add to give our lens to our ordinances or future ordinances, or to even guide the council, the committee in informing for finding specific tasks to do. Open-ended things I feel like are difficult, and having dealt with these kinds of things for like 30 years and trying to get nature onto the books and into laws and stuff like that, it's very difficult. But you also don't want to be super divisive in your town. And but if you have this framework and an ideal, and you can manage it through specific action items and things are reported, I think that's a wonderful thing. And we can absorb this framework and push it up to the county as a climate action committee, because the rights of nature are huge. There's something called the COP17 that's happening in Colombia later this year that the UN is definitely trying to support the rights of nature and financing the stability of our and preservation of our natural places. So I do think this goes along with that, but I think it may be a great framework, but a difficult ordinance.
Mm-hmm. All right, a little further comment from me, again, not as facilitator, just as a member. Coming back to the feeling that the language is just a little too big and a little too open. As someone who went to graduate school to study community-based ecological design, I still have reservations about how much this opens things up, because frankly, most people are not all that well informed about the natural world. And if it's really any citizen in town is empowered to do any action to protect any species in town, that's just too big a lens. And by, one example that came up a bunch of years ago, there was a redwood tree planted in a parking strip by a commercial lot, and it was a bad place to plant a redwood tree, and it was getting too big, and it was breaking the sidewalk, and it literally had roots reaching in and coming up in the toilet inside the restroom of the adjoining business. And the business owner said, can we please take out this tree because it's messing all this stuff up? And of course, it's cutting down a sacred redwood. And somebody was coming to meetings saying, I can commune with the redwood and I can convince it not to put its roots up in your toilet anymore. I'm like, well, how is that going to help me? How long is it going to take me? So I feel like it just opens such a huge can of worms. So there's one that it's just a big, vague statement that is open to a lot of misuse, which could get very NIMBY-ish or could get very personal. And then there's this question of how does it work exactly? And this sort of like the compliance assurance section is it's one sentence. And so there's this implication that if we say, okay, this is about highlighting issues in the municipal code with a lens of the rights of, ecological rights. Okay, that sounds great, but how is that actually going to play out on the city? And so a part of developing proposals within this committee over the years has been that you figure out who in the city is going to bear the brunt of your suggestion, and you try to go and talk to them and say, what do you think about this? How would this work? So it's kind of a staff liaison thing. So before we say, hey, you should do all this extra stuff that sounds good, we say, what does this mean if we ask you to do this sort of stuff? So personally, not speaking as a facilitator, I don't feel that this is quite ready to go on. I think more refining of the language, getting a little more specific about it, and also just trying to get some staff input on how this might actually function. And particularly people like the city attorney or who does code enforcement in town. I don't even really know. So if a citizen brings a complaint based on rights of nature, who's going to deal with that in the city? I personally don't know, but we ought to find out as just part of the diligence of making this proposal. So I'm done personally. I notice again, we're running out of time. I'm sorry that we spent so much time on process and that I feel like this subject should certainly benefit from more discussion. We can certainly take it up again in future meetings, as we will be with the, also important RCPA collaborative discussion. Are there any further questions or comments or asks for action?
Yeah, I'd just like to echo your comments, Joshua, and also say that having been sitting on the city council for many, many years, that's exactly the sort of questions that the city council might be asking. What would be the burden of this of this proposal on the planning commission? Who would do the work? We, by the way, do not actually have a code enforcer in this town. So what are the practical and pragmatic implications of this ordinance? So yeah, I think some further work to try to refine it is what I would recommend too. Thanks.
My hand is raised.
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear that basically it's not meant to just give people the right to sue. It is meant to become basically a city program that the city would express what the problems were. Like somebody comes for a permit for a certain project, then the city would explain how this law works. So it's not just, anybody could bring a lawsuit. And also, I think that to get into the planning commission is where we would find out the answers to what you're asking, which is, how do they enforce it? What would it look like? Nobody in this committee knows. The planning commission would know that, and then we could refine it once we present it to them. But, all we're asking is that, basically, I hear an agreement of the intention in this committee. And I feel like you could say, we would like to pass it forward with these concerns that we assume the planning commission, having more experience in this kind of matter, would take these issues on. And then we can go to the next stage.
There's a distinction to be made between the planning commission and the planning department that I think is pivotal in that respect. The commission is essentially citizen advisors on projects and project development. My feeling is that this needs to be workshopped more, but again, that's just me.
But, I'm fully aware of that. I've been to hundreds of meetings, but I do want to be clear that the planning department is at those meetings.
The planning department is at our meetings too.
Can I ask what our next steps are so that we can wrap this up? I'm a little unclear.
Yeah, for sure.
Chair, if you would like, I've listened to your discussion and I agree very much with Chair, your assessment of this ordinance. This ordinance would become a part of the municipal code, and as part of the municipal code, it would need to be enforced, and it's extremely vague. And the implications for the community are huge in terms of enforcement. Something that I always think about in terms of code adoption and whatnot is, and you've said this, you need to take something all the way to the end and understand implementation, unintended consequences. How is this going to function? What resources do we have? This draft ordinance from the city of Santa Monica would need a tremendous amount of work. And really, in terms of presenting this to the commission, the planning commission, the commission really is not in a position to do the level of work with this draft ordinance or proposed ordinance. This really should go back, and there should be some truthing and checking in with staff members, attorneys, et cetera, to really understand for the city of Sebastopol, given its general plan and the idea of advancing the rights of nature, what does that mean and what's appropriate for the city of Sebastopol in terms of your resources? And so I think that this draft ordinance needs that consideration, that lens, that context. And the Planning Commission really is not in a position to do that level of work. That's my observation.
Thank you for that clarification. We are now more than 15 minutes over, which is as much time as I had asked for. So I would like to regretfully take this subject up again at a further meeting. Before we do that, let me ask just quickly, is there anyone here on the committee who feels that this proposal as it stands is ready to be kicked forward with our approval to the Planning Commission and further bodies?
Just a question, what if we reframe that to say, to kick this forward to the planning department, not the commission, but to the planning department, run it by the attorney, et cetera?
Oh, well, personally, I would fully encourage communicating with city staff about it. I think that's a separate question and not what we were being asked for approval on.
Sure.
I feel like I'm not really sure, bottom line, what this is accomplishing beyond, so asking to take the city's resources, the planning department time and all that to do a whole bunch of research, I would not be in favor of asking for that.
And again, Chair, if I could, in terms of staff capacity, in my view of this really needs outside, not city work, to further refine it, to really look at this community's general plan, this community's resources, and how this could be implemented. As we discussed earlier about budget constraints, this ordinance in its current form would take a tremendous amount of staff time, city attorney time, or commission time. It's not ready, in my opinion, for that.
All right. Thank you for your perspective, David. Any further comments, Diana?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with Lisa Pierce. I wouldn't be prepared to support this ordinance as it currently stands, being submitted by the Climate Action Committee to the Planning Department with direction, request the Planning Department engage in research. I'm not prepared to request that level of resources at this time.
All right. With that, I want to thank the Rights of Nature Working Group for your work and your time on this. Thank you for keeping this subject alive and bringing it forward. Unfortunately, we feel that that there's some refinement that needs to happen. We do want to keep taking this subject up. It just opens a kettle of fish, and we need to be careful, particularly this year with the city strapped for resources in what we're asking and what we're that they take on. So let's talk about it again, please. Yeah.
Thank you for all the input. I notated all the notes and we'll go back and we'll keep chomping on those mosquitoes.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So last little bit before we head out the door, So we have this, which why don't you all be in contact with myself and Kenna in terms of if you want to bring this up again next month, or if you want the month following, certainly welcome to it. We do have the RCPA collaboration discussion that we need to get into as well. We'll put that at the beginning of next month's meeting so that we can take some good time on that. Are there any other agenda items for next month's meeting that come to mind for folks? Obviously, there's weeks yet to work that out. Just wanted to see if there's anything it's urgent today.
To next month, right?
We did. Thank you for mentioning that. And yes, we will hit that next month as well because it's been delayed. So, all right.
There was a previous action item where we were going to follow up with the event that was held in this room, I guess 3 months ago, for the, I guess it was Climate Action Resiliency Division, where we had really poor turnout, and we were going to try to dig in a little bit around that, why or what can be
Okay,
done
so that's
to-
a sort of a strategic discussion
Yeah.
point there. Okay. Okay. Great. Thanks everyone for sticking it out. Pleasure. Have a good one. We'll see you next month, if not before.
Thank you, Magic.